here, because we're also joined by Ernst van Zyl, who is AfriForum's head of public relations. And Ernst, obviously, where you have the land question, you're going to be met with some pushback. And I'm keen to see if that really is what AfriForum is doing here, what you've done, in fact, at the beginning of this month, announcing that you have made it clear that the organization, that is AfriForum, has made it clear to the ANC that you will launch substantial legal action to protect private property rights in South Africa in the event that the president signs the expropriation bill or if the ANC tries to amend the constitution. So it seems that you might be going head to head here with the steps that are being taken by the Nelson Mandela Foundation, Ernst.
Well, Milady, actually something that's very pertinent to this topic is the fact that AfriForum actually supports the restitution process that has been in place for many decades in South Africa. Unfortunately, a land restitution process that has been completely derailed by mismanagement, corruption, land going to those with the bright political connections. We all know the story. I mean, there's so many stories out there of this. Often also a land restitution process where those who gain the land through this process do not get the proper support from the government that was promised. And Dr. Ramphele mentioned that when she gave her inputs. And there's another aspect here that's absolutely critical to understand in regards to solving the problem of getting more South Africans involved within the agriculture sector, particularly with agricultural land. And that is the fact that just this month, the Ministry of Land Reform and Rural Development confirmed through a parliamentary question that out of the total of about 64,300 land claims that have been settled since 1998, only about 8,300, about 12.9% of the successful claimants took possession of the land that they sought, while about 56,000 or about 87% chose money or financial compensation instead. That's a critical fact to take into account here. When it comes to the redistribution of land, that's what needs to be addressed. It's not the problem that there is not land to be redistributed. It is that land is being hoarded by the government on one side. On the other side, people are choosing money and financial compensation rather than the land itself. And I think that's the other damning statistic, is the fact that of all the land that the government has acquired since the start of the land reform process, only about 6% has been transferred to private ownership. So we have a big problem with a government that is hoarding land, and one of the other panelists mentioned this as well, the fact that a lot of the land that's been expropriated or bought by the government has been not redistributed to private hands. And I mean, this is where the real scary or real big statistics come in that paint the full picture. The state owns about 17 million hectares of land, and that is more or less the area of the provinces of KwaZulu-Natal and Mpumalanga combined. Then if you also take into account that the ownership of about 8.3 million hectares has not yet been officially accounted for, even though experts expect much of it will fall under state ownership, that's another Mpumalanga-sized piece of land that the state is holding on to. So that's the challenge. When any conversation about land redistribution is to be had, the first place that conversation needs to go is that the government needs to put its redistribution where its mouth is, stop talking about land redistribution, and actually start redistributing the land that it's hoarding, the millions upon millions of hectares of land that it owns. And I mean, that's where the critical issue lies, is that we don't have a problem with no land being available for redistribution. We have millions of hectares of land in state control that are there for redistribution. It's just not being redistributed for those two reasons that I mentioned. Firstly, the fact that the government is not redistributing it, and secondly, that almost 90% of claimants are opting for money rather than land.
Ernst, and I hear you, and I want to bring in Dr. Ramphele because you've got quite a bit to answer here, Dr. Ramphele.